Is the MV Agusta Superveloce 800 all show and no go? Only one way to find out. Send it.
To me, this MV Agusta Superveloce 800 it's a bit of an enigma. And I'll tell you what, I'm not massively into pretty bikes for the sake of pretty bikes. I like them, don't get me wrong, who doesn't like a pretty bike? But I've said it before about MVs, I find them a little bit too showy. He doesn't, he loves them. I find them a little bit too showy sometimes. I find them a bit too bling bling, look at me. Kind of like the motorcycle equivalent of a Lamborghini. Yes, they've got phenomenal power and performance and all that stuff, but they shout about it and show it off, and that's not what I like on a bike. However, more recently, and certain models kind of slipped through the net for me. One was the Rush I rode with the bike specialist, which I loved the fact that it looked so bonkers with its styling, but was actually pretty classy. But I also love I also love doing jumps. I also love that it was special to ride. It was fast, it was aggressive, it was angry. It offered something that you couldn't get from, let's say, a BMW S1000RR or a Yamaha R1, you know, your sort of mainstream superbikes. And the Rush has irritatingly opened a bit of a crack in my not a huge fan of MV's armour, and this one slipped through as well, the Superveloce. Grumpy Chris, grumpy old man Chris, who occasionally comes out to play, looks at it and says, why is it wearing a tiara on its windscreen? Why is there a watch strap on the fuel tank that doesn't actually hold the fuel tank down? Those mirrors make it difficult to strap it into the side of my van, etc, etc. But the whole effect when it's parked up and you're looking at it, I love the details. I love the fact that they managed to get away with so few bolts on the fairing surfaces. I love the fact that it does actually look very unique. It's taken its own direction with styling, when it has to be said at the moment, superbikes are starting to sort of mould into all the same shape. This doesn't look like that. This looks completely different, and I like that. The fact that the styling is a little bit retro as well, it also kind of appeals to the sort of thing I like. So they've pushed a good few of my buttons to making me like a bike in the styling terms. On top of that, on paper, 147 horsepower, 173 kilos dry, which is probably 190 kilos full of fuel-ish. It's pretty good. It's not groundbreaking, but it's pretty damn good. But in those numbers, it's not the fastest bike I've ever ridden, it's not the lightest bike I've ever ridden, so it's not like out at any extreme on that sense. But they've made it feel quite raw, and that's where again it's appealed to me. It reminds me of my first generation Triumph 675 Daytona, which is a bike I absolutely adore. It's one of my all-time favourite bikes. It just sounds good, it feels good, it's rough around the edges, and when I rode the latest version of the Daytona, the 765 Moto 2 version, while there was no denying it's a phenomenal bit of kit and a very capable bike, it lacks some of that rough around the edges excitement that the original one had. MV's got it. It's got it. It's a little bit vibey. The engine note has got that kind of coarse edge to it. Chassis-wise, I'd say it's a little more conservative. It's not sat on its nose. It's not razor-sharp steering. It's not super firm. It's just good for road riding and capable of going quick on a track too. They've actually done a chassis that isn't extreme, a chassis that is very, very rideable. which does make sense. Kind of cool, characterful engine, and then a chassis that you can actually use without it annoying the hell out of you, or knocking your confidence if you're not such an aggressive rider.
Now, as much as I love riding on the road, I did want to take the MV on track. It's not strictly designed as a track bike, but that didn't mean we weren't going to find the excuse to go and razz it around my local track at Pembrey to see how it performed when you got a chance to really push the limits. On track, I have to say, the MV was the perfect bike for a mid-pack rider, if that makes any sense. Despite reputation and appearance, it's not this super finicky, pointy, angry sports bike thing that the stereotype would probably suggest. It's actually really kind and cuddly. On track, it wasn't razor sharp, it was just smooth, flowing, never really got out of shape, never slapped its bars. It didn't feel like the kind of angry race machine that, to be honest, I expected it to be. The only thing that held it back from going harder and faster on the track, for me, was the electronics. The ABS system doesn't seem to have any sort of full track mode where you can turn off all of the rear wheel lift avoidance and all of the backing in control. You can fiddle with it to a degree, but I never got it to leave me completely alone. Especially at a track like Pembrey with some hard braking zones, I found it quite annoying that every time you just started to push the limits a bit, the back wheel would slide, it would kick you off the front brake, and you'd miss the apex. Now, is that a problem? Probably not for 90% of riders. If you're someone who pushes really hard on the brakes on track, likes the bike sliding around, backing in, this will start to frustrate you, right up to the point where you pull the fuse out of the ABS. But if you're someone who rides not at that level, on track, this was lovely. Huge spread of power, really nice fueling on track, and a decent traction control system that let you get aggressively on the throttle out of the hairpin. Yeah. But then the MV Agusta Superveloce 800 blah 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 was never actually meant to be a track bike. It was supposed to be well, I guess it was supposed to be a fast cafe racer, a super cafe racer, or just a really pretty sports bike, and it does that really well. What surprised me most about this MV Superveloce is the fact that it doesn't come with too many compromises, certainly not nearly as many as its reputation would suggest. Sure, when you're riding in 30 limits and slow speed or cruising on a dual carriageway, the riding position is kind of sporty. It's not really comfortable, and it's certainly not the sort of thing that you would spend 1,000 miles a day in the saddle of, unless you're some kind of sadist. But it does really work well on a bumpy road, and that was the bit that surprised me the most. Sure, it's fairly taut, but it's not this rigid, razor-sharp, slappy, horrible thing that I thought it was going to be. It's got an engine with bags of character, really nice throttle response, an angry, rough feel to the motor, and then a chassis that just lets you get on with riding your favourite roads as fast as you want. It's kind of the best of both worlds, and that's what's caught me out with it. When you look at a bike that's as heavily styled as this, that's as unique as this, and let's face it, comes with a nearly £20,000 price tag, I kind of expected this ridiculous supercar-esque, uncompromising, unusable, but you ride it and you're proud of it because you spent so much money on it sort of thing. But what I got was something that has all the supercar status and looks, but it's great for a 3, 4, 5 hour ride on a Sunday. That surprised me. Feels kind of weird to talk about reliability when we're talking about Italian sports bikes. I kind of grew up through that time when if you bought an Italian sports bike, you didn't mention the R word, you just accepted that it was going to be a bit rubbish, but you loved it anyway. These days, that's kind of all changed. You know, Ducati's reliability is a million times better than it used to be. Same with Aprilia, and to be honest, the same with MV. Is this going to be 100% reliable? If you're asking that question, go and buy an R1. Is my honest answer. I can't tell you whether this is going to be as reliable as the best of the Japanese bikes. My gut feeling, probably not. But the good news is, MV's a better prospect to buy than they've ever been for years. Because where for years they were a mad little Italian company and you basically did everything on a favour and a cup of coffee, now it's owned by the monster that is the KTM, Husqvarna, Gas, CF Moto, MV Agusta group. So you have got big backup of dealer network, and the backup of a proper UK supplier distributor that, while it might not make them perfect, it definitely makes them a much better bet if that's the sort of thing you're concerned about. Plus, the looks never break down, so you've got to take the positive.
So here's where it's tricky. The performance of this bike isn't miles ahead of what else is available. I can get this level of performance out of something like a street triple, even a 990 Duke if I wanted to go twin cylinder. But even if I wanted 3-cylinder, why would you buy this over a street triple or even a speed triple RR, which for me is kind of the most obvious contemporary to this thing. when you consider this is nearly 20 grand, it starts to sort of, yeah, niggle away at my head, like, why would you buy one? But then you have to switch into the less analytic and less quantitative motorcycle brain. We buy bikes because we love them. We buy bikes out of a want, not a need. I don't need a motorcycle like this in my life. Doesn't stop me wanting one. And when you look at it with those eyes, the styling, the looks, and then those things I've talked about, the character, the feel, the raw edge to the engine, the fact that it is a bit special, then it becomes justified. Now, whether that's justified to you or not depends on how much you value performance versus prettiness. I can't answer that question. I can answer, but I need to put some fuel in it and spend a little bit more time deciding whether or not I want an MV Agusta Superveloce.
What's nice is the price of exclusivity and beauty is just a number. It doesn't come with a ton of compromises that ruin the enjoyment of the bike. Good job, MV.